I guess unless you're Herod or Herodias. I guess for Herodias it was great news. So what do you do with that? What's the next song? Yeah, not. Oh my goodness. Well, there we are. Anybody got a good joke? Yeah?
Oh, wait. I was going to tell a joke about construction, but I'm still working on it.
Oh, okay. Did you get that one? She was going to tell a joke about construction, but she's still working on it.
Yeah, you guys are missing it.
Oh, wow. And yet that's still better than the reading. So what do we do with this reading seriously, folks? We embrace it. What else can you do? We deal with it. It's a horrible story. It's so many levels, it's a horrible story. Jesus isn't in it. Did you notice that? He doesn't make even an appearance except his name is mentioned once. Only time in Mark, Jesus isn't present. Or is he? So why did Mark even bother with this story? And to such length. I mean, wouldn't like one sentence have been sufficient, you know? Herod had John killed. Do we need to know any more? Did you need to know all that detail? Why is it there? I mean, Mark made a decision to tell us all this. Why? I mean, only Mark truly knows the answer to that. It is placed in between Jesus sending out the disciples on their first preaching tour without him and their successful return. Maybe Mark wants us to know that when you go out to preach the kingdom, not everybody will like what you say. A lot, they won't like it. Because, you know, up till now, by and large, this has been one giant success story for Jesus. Everywhere he goes, he's healing the sick, and he's casting out demons, and he's preaching the good news of God's kingdom coming in, and other than a few ticked-off Pharisees, he's doing pretty well. Maybe this story's a wake-up call. Maybe this story is a reminder to us that when we stay true to Jesus, and when we stay true to God's Word, and when we stay true to the calling of God like John does, the consequences may not be happy. Because we know what happens to John will happen to Jesus. The government will come after him, and the government will catch him, and the government will kill him. Different government, to be sure. Same outcome, though. Is the moral here, don't take on the government because you'll lose? It's an awful story. Herod is an awful man. Not as awful as his father, but, you know, he does what he can. He's a puppet. He's a despot. He's a spineless worm. He operates under the same principle, and I read this, and I don't remember where I read this, but it's a quote from the Washington Post, from a lobbyist in Washington. He said there's only two things that make things happen in Washington. One is greed, and the other is fear. That's how Herod operates. Greed and fear. Those are his tools. Greed isn't always about money. Greed can be about power or status. Anything where we want more, and we'll do whatever it takes to get that more. That's Herod. He wants more. He He wants his brother's wife. So he takes her. See, his brother's not dead. His brother is happily ruling whatever part of the kingdom Rome gave him. He married his sister-in-law. Herod does, while his brother's still alive and married to her. John calls him out on that. Imagine. It's greed and fear. Those people who gathered with him at that party for his birthday, you think they were there by choice? They were there out of fear and greed themselves, because maybe there's something in it for them if they show up. Maybe they can get a little piece of the pie for themselves by kissing up to Herod on his birthday. But they're there out of fear too, because what happens if they say, no thanks, I'm not coming? Maybe Herod comes after them. Greed and fear are at work here. Isn't that the way of the world? Isn't that always the way of the world? Greed and fear. We want more. We want more of whatever more might be. We measure everything by what we gain from it. What's in it for me? How much profit will I make? How successful will I be? How much more will people like me and appreciate me because I do something? Or fear. We operate out of fear. We build our nest eggs and we build our walls because we're afraid of what might happen without both. We're afraid of other people. We're afraid of what they might do to us. We're afraid of what they might take from us. We're afraid of how they're going to take what's ours, how they're going to hurt us in some way. And we look at people with fear, and we judge them, and we push them aside. That lobbyist wasn't wrong. He just didn't have a big enough scale. It's not just Washington, it's everywhere. Because that's the kingdom of the world. That's Herod's kingdom. He understands it perfectly. He plays it like a master. And into that world comes John the Baptist. And into that world comes Jesus. And they say your world is wrong. And they say your world is built on a lie. Your world is not built on God. Because God is not a God of greed and fear. God is a God of hope and mercy. God is a God of love, not hate. God invites us to share and to give, not to hoard and push away. John speaks the truth to Herod and his wife. And there's consequences for speaking the truth. Because, Herodias doesn't like what she's hearing. Would you? Would you like the prophet of God getting in your face and calling you an adulteress? No. She's there because she wants the power too. She knew Herod was a step up from Philip. So she bides her time because she knows Herod will slip up. And he does. He throws his birthday party. And the halftime entertainment is his own daughter. You think about that a second. He runs out his daughter to do a little dance for the boys. Think that's good? Think that's a noble and honorable thing to do? No. They like what they see, though. Herod likes what he sees, and he's so worked up over it that he says this stupid thing. He says, oh my gosh, baby, that was so good. I'll give you half my kingdom. I'm so happy. Ask me for whatever you want. She doesn't know what to do, so she runs to Mommy. What does Mommy say? I got you now. Kill John. Girl don't care. She don't know John from anybody. She runs out there and says, Daddy, Daddy, I want John's head on a platter. And Herod's caught in his own greed and his own fear. And he has no choice. So he caves in and he sends the executioner. It's an awful story. There is no good news literally in this story, no matter what Lance called it. There's none. None at all. This is the world at its worst, at its most violent, at its most awful. And it's there in the middle of Mark because of one reason and one reason only, because that's where we go. Because that's where God is sending us. That's where God sent the disciples, and that is where God is sending us, into a cesspool. What do you say to a cesspool? One thing, that the cesspool doesn't win. This is a story, folks. It is not the story. That's the good news. This is a story about a power-mad, sniveling little coward who thinks he's in control, who thinks he can silence God by silencing John. And this is about an empire based 1,000 miles away with an emperor who thinks he can silence God by silencing Jesus. The world thinks it can silence God. And the only good news we find in this story is that it doesn't work. John will be raised. Herod's kind of right. John will be raised. It's just not he's not Jesus, that's all. Jesus preaches a kingdom in contrast to this kingdom. Jesus inaugurates a new kingdom. A kingdom of love, and a kingdom of mercy, and a kingdom of grace and forgiveness. Sometimes it's hard to see that kingdom, but it's there. Pilate will kill Jesus, and God will say, nice try. And God will raise Jesus. And in the raising of Jesus, God says to the Herods of the world and the Pilates of the world and anyone else who thinks that they can manipulate the world by greed and fear and intimidation and brutality, do your worst, I can do more. I can conquer that. It might take a while, it might be slow in coming, but it's there. And it's going to take work, and it's going to take patience, and it's going to take disciples going out 2 by 2 and facing the world and bringing to it that message that says the way that you think you know is right isn't, because God has a better way. And God has shown it to you in Jesus. You have to pay attention to what comes next in Mark to see that. Because what comes next after the disciples come back with their ta-da stories about all the good they did is Jesus is going to have a banquet. Jesus is going to throw a party. But it's not going to be for the rich and the powerful, the hangers-on and the greedy, what do you call those fish, those sucker fish? Mutt? Yeah. Whatever they are, I don't care. Things that suck on the parasite things. Jesus is going to have anybody who wants to come. He's going to have 5,000 people sitting on a lawn, and he's going to have loaves and fishes, and he's going to make that meal last, and he's going to extend it to all people who are there, and it's going to be such a bountiful meal of blessing that there's going to be leftovers. And instead of lives ending, lives are lifted up. And it's a banquet of good news and welcome and love and embracing and grace. This is a story, folks. It's not the story. God tells the story, and the story is Jesus, and we are a part of that story. And we are a part of that kingdom. And we need to stand tall. And we need to stand strong and firm in that message and in that faith. There's no hedging on being a Christian. There's no, I'll do it sometimes, but not another time. It's 100% lifetime, lifelong, full-bore commission. You don't get a day off. You don't get to look the other way once in a while. You don't get to just step aside and say, okay, world, this is your day. I'll come back tomorrow. We have to be on our job all the time. We have to be agents of grace every day. We have to be that messenger of love every day, all the time. Because the world of Herod never takes a day off. We can't either. You need to turn to wisdom on a day like this. So here's a very wise man. His name is Gandalf. He says, some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I have found that it is the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. Tell that one to Herod.